Replacing Social Security, Medicare, and government-funded welfare. Welcome to episode 5 of Liberty and Morality Defined. Don't you dare touch my earnings! Social Security, welfare, and other government-funded programs of redistribution are pretty much all met with this kind of pride-filled defense. It's a pride fueled by how honestly these people felt that they earned such a program or the entrance into such a program. It doesn't matter really if the program is Social Security, health care, disability, food stamps, pensions for government workers, college tuition paid as a military perk. It really doesn't matter. And even if the people believe they paid into these systems willingly all their lives, and they feel like they have to have something to show for it, they all got swindled. They all got duped. There's no money in these coffers, just IOUs being shuffled around to pay IOUs. That's really what it all amounts to. I mean, Many people might consider the fact that Social Security and pensions are not the same as a contractual obligation agreed upon by those in military service or generic government employees. But, they'd be right except for one fact that these are all funded by taxes. All of those programs previously mentioned are funded by taxes. Taxation is theft, and taxation, it carries the same penalty for non-compliance as does being caught for murder and and tried for murder and punished for murder. The same potential penalty is death. So if you decide that you don't want to pay your taxes anymore, then the system is going to they're going to escalate this. They're going to levy additional fines and fees against you, and then they're going to attempt to kidnap you if you fail to pay those fines and fees. Now, if you resist that kidnapping, the law enforcement officers who are tasked with collecting you, if they feel that your resistance endangers their life, then they will escalate it and justify killing you and claim their own self-defense, despite the fact that they're going to do this without actually realizing, or by realizing, even if they do realize it, that they're going to be in the wrong. It doesn't matter. They're violating your consent to being interacted with. They're following the edicts of other people. It kind of comes down to the if a lot of people have heard it, in Episode 4 of Star Wars: A New Hope, Obi-Wan Kenobi says, "Who's the more foolish, the fool or the fool who follows it?" In other words, who's more morally responsible for these heinous crimes? The guy who gives the orders or the guy who follows the orders. Okay, that's what this boils down to. So, because taxation fuels these programs and government is constantly making promises and spending money, it has to constantly tax, and when it can't acquire enough taxes, it has to borrow the difference. But this borrowing is eventually going to translate into taxation anyway. It's not going to matter if it's borrowed or taxed today. The point is that somebody's going to have to pay for this, and it's only going to get worse if we continue these programs as is, via funded by taxation. See, this is the problem with these programs. Nobody wants to talk about how they're going to be paid for. Nobody wants to talk about the fiscal responsibility with these programs. But here's the kicker. What is to be done about it? I mean, Everybody wants to say, oh no, privatization is going to cause a problem with this. But privatization hasn't even really been tried. And Social Security qualification age is pretty much raised every so often. The benefits paid out rarely match the rate of inflation. Welfare benefits don't discriminate based on how the individual actually tries to provide for him or herself. In other words, when you look at it in terms of unemployment, how that doesn't actually encourage people to work. I mean, I took unemployment benefits for not quite a year, less than a year, not quite two full quarters, And I they I looked for a job. I legitimately, absolutely did look for a job. I wanted a job. I needed a job. I did not want to be on unemployment insurance. I didn't like it. It made me feel dirty. I don't know. It was uncomfortable. And standing in line with these people, I would listen to stories about people. Oh man, an expletive company laid me off, and this and that. And when will these Republicans learn? And then I learned, well, when do these Democrats learn that you can't tax this, and these expletive people this, and how you tax them, and then it causes my employer to lay me off, and now I gotta stand in this expletive line. Like, I didn't like either group, and it it was weird standing in those lines. I did not like it. I would rather go without than take that. And a lot of people might say that, I have some chip on my shoulder, but quite honestly, I'd rather not perpetuate the system with what I know now. And back then it made me feel weird to be in that situation anyway. But never once in that whole duration was I actually truly challenged. I mean, I filled out the paperwork, I went through the motions. It said every week, every week you have to submit how many applications you filled out, where you filled them out, and so on and so forth. And I filled them out. I filled out 10 to 15 a week. I would go to a job fair pretty much every week in addition to those 10 or 15. I applied everywhere and nobody was hiring. It didn't matter. I got turned down at so many places. I'm overqualified, a former restaurant manager, a former kitchen trainer, a former deli bakery manager, turned down at McDonald's, overqualified. It didn't matter. I heard that more often than not. Now, I'm going to go out and say it. I'm just not the best at selling myself, and that is absolutely part of my problem. I'm just not good at selling myself, and I will be the first to admit it. But when people get a chance to see me work, that's when everything changes. Now I'm to the point where there are 3 or 4 places where if I go back to them, I'm not going to have much of a problem getting a job if they have an opening. They will pick me over just any Joe Schmo any day of the week. And in one place, I'll be picked over family to work there because they know who I am and what I'm capable of doing. But that's the thing. I shouldn't have to worry about not having a job because they let me go because of all of this government meddling into the system. So it really doesn't matter what these benefits are. Military benefits, though, are often ignored, or the agreement is changed. I do believe that, what was it? There was some situation. I think World War I vets were promised something, and they marched on the White House at some point in time, demanding their benefits. I mean, everybody complains about how awful it's going to be in the private sector, but nobody realizes this one truth, that the private sector has been hijacked by government, and the first thing that the government did to hijack the private sector was implement taxation. Now, I'll get to this again at the end of this, or near the end of this program, where I'll explain what taxation does in a brief nutshell. But for now, the government takes over all these positions, and people like to say, oh, well, the private sector is going to ruin it. Well, really, even a private sector under the control of a government, it's still somewhat better in most cases. But here you can see Social Security qualification age is raised every so often in order to keep it solvent. So basically it's saying, basically these rules are saying, let's hope people die before they get to being able to qualify for this. That's what that is. And that right there should tell you something about government funded programs. That is a soft core death panel, in essence. That's what that is. So you're afraid of the free market, or a slightly free market, over a government controlled situation where they basically put a gun to your head to pay taxes? The welfare benefits, they don't actually discriminate against people who go out there and try. I could have just filled out information, and they never would have checked, probably. I've seen people who are on welfare for 99 plus weeks on unemployment that Never got caught. No, nothing happened to them. It's ridiculous. And military benefits. Like my brother in the military, the Marine Corps. All sorts of problems with the VA hospitals. He can't get anything. He can't get prescriptions for back injury he sustained over there, where he's got some slipped discs, and I mean, it's ridiculous. The body armor that they made him wear over there, that didn't fit properly, gave him back issues. They didn't care, and what are they doing about it now? And so it's ridiculous. So beneath government, people like myself are going to be taxed to pay for the benefits of those who are currently receiving. And, what isn't covered again by these taxes is going to be borrowed to be repaid to future generations. So here's the question. What happens if taxation disappears tomorrow? How will those receiving the benefits today have their promises kept? Currently, there's no guarantee under the current system that these promises are going to be kept. But there's also no guarantee that private industry, private businesses, private charities and entities are going to be able to keep promises either. But here's the truth, and you have to ask yourself, you might want to turn this off if you're not ready for the truth. The truth is going to hurt. It's going to make a lot of people upset, and it's going to cause a lot of unjust blowback. The truth is that people will just have to suffer. There will be people who will be faced with death. It's not fair. But neither is putting anyone on the hook for a promise made to you as the recipient of any of these government programs that lied to you, that cheated you, and otherwise duped you into accepting it as a legitimate authority. Despite the fact that authority always had a gun to your head saying you will pay into the system or else. It might not have told you right off the bat to join the military, but in many cases it did through conscription laws, through draft laws. It may not have said for you to apply for disability or to pay into that system, but if you're receiving, you did. So, this is the problem with this situation here. The gun is the rule of law, and the rule of law is nothing but coercing compliance to control the actions of others you've never met before in order to placate but not eliminate the fear you have about others, about what they are capable of doing but not guaranteed to do with their freedom, whether it is good or bad. It doesn't matter. And that is Social Security, Medicare, and other government-funded welfare programs. That is what they essentially are for. It is to protect what other people are not guaranteed to do that is good for you. That's what they're designed for. So, I hate having to be this mean, and I feel terrible having to say it like this because I try not to. At this point, there's not really any way around it. But the thing is by asking government to do these things, it's basically asking them to pay for that which you failed, for whatever reason, to pay for yourself. And that ends up being the problem. Unfortunately, this is one area of discussion that really gets me upset. And, people feel like those who are receiving benefits, they feel like they're being attacked. They typically will end up feeling as if their entire life's work was for naught. I truly understand that situation. I really do. I've been the victim of theft before. I don't much care for it. It's because the results made me into a slave for somebody else's enjoyment. My time, intellect, and labor was refined into dollars. I used those to trade for my cell phone and eyeglasses and $5 worth of change sitting in my center console of my glove box in the late 90s. I was in the Cobb Galleria working for a restaurant at the time in the Atlanta area, and I had my vehicle broken into. And boy, was I furious when I found that at the end of working a 12, 14-hour shift in a restaurant. I was furious. And so, I had insurance, but I had to pay the deductible, and essentially the thief made me a slave to his or her desires for the amount of time it took me to refine my time, intellect, and labor to create wealth, to ultimately acquire the things that they stole from me. And that is what is happening now with these government programs. people are coerced and tricked into accepting them through rule of law, gun to their head essentially. I mean, the politicians lied and spent that money on other endeavors. Now the current generations and future unborn generations are put on the hook to pay for those today who don't want to go without. I mean, how is that fair to make those who are not currently receiving anything pay for those who are? I mean, how are people like me, who I work a part-time job, 20 hours a week about, I make $11.25 an hour, I should get about $225 a week, okay? But I don't. If I work a straight 20 hours, I'm lucky to get about $180 to $185, maybe $190, okay, after taxes. And where is this going? Payroll taxes. Most of it is payroll taxes. To pay for people who are too cowardly or short-sighted 40, 50, 60, 100 years ago to stand up to these people who promised them stuff, who lied to them, spent their money on other things, other pork projects or other earmarks and wars that were unnecessary. I mean, how is it fair to make people like me pay for those who are currently receiving something? That money is gone. Cut your losses. Get over it. That's what's going on today. And the people who are receiving, they keep receiving and doing this, and they want to know why the system isn't being changed for the better. Why people aren't changing. The system is not changing. Too many people are receiving, are justifying theft from those currently working because, by golly, I paid into this system and I'm going to get something back for it. Well, great, but you're stealing from me and every other Joe Schmo out there working, to collect. But I guarantee you that of every Joe Schmo out there working to collect, you might be lucky if you get 1 out of 100 like me, who currently right now are refusing to take anything. I apply for I could apply and get a couple $1,000s worth of assistance for income, welfare, but I don't take a penny of it. I'm not going to take a penny of it. I could cheat the system and get a whole lot of stuff, but I'm not going to. First, because it's only going to help perpetuate the system and cause more problems. A lot of people will argue this fact where, oh, well, you're going to help collapse the system. No, you're not. No, you're not, because all that's going to happen is that the system is just going to print more. Okay? They're going to print more. It might take another 150 years for the system to collapse. I don't have 150 years left in my life. I'm pretty sure of that. At best, I might have, at 35, I might have another 60 years left. But I can tell you right now, I might have another good 25 or 30 years left in my life. After that, who knows what's going to happen? They might roll me over and put me in a ditch if I can't keep working to pay taxes. I have no idea. All I can tell you right now is that it took Rome 2,000 years to collapse. It took England, okay, the British Empire never actually truly collapsed. It kept going. It had some major issues. It had a number of depression era like times, but it never truly actually collapsed, and it's still going, and the people are still being oppressed over there. They had a number of revolutions, I suppose, but they didn't collapse. So telling me that I should go ahead and take it and encourage the system to collapse, no. Just stop justifying playing by their rules. That's the thing. So, I mean, that's what's going on today with why these systems don't work. And again, those who are receiving should have just bitten the bullet instead of passing the enslavement card on to their descendants. And that's the truth so many don't want to hear. It's a harsh truth. It's a reality that so many don't want to face. Yeah, it's easier to give in than to be the change in the world you want to see. But think of it this way, and I understand, it is so much easier to give in and just say, oh, I would rather get something back, I paid for it, and screw you for telling me I didn't earn it. Yeah, it's easier to complain about no one changing the system instead of changing for others to see. So, next time you decide to collect your Social Security check and you want to fight back and say, I need to get involved in politics, consider what you're saying right there. You're saying that you want me to do as you say, but not as you do. Basically, you're passing the buck of responsibility for the things that have taken place in your lifetime. You could have changed them and you didn't if you're a recipient of government welfare. But to change for yourself so that you can be the person in the world that you want to see, the change in the world that you want to see, that makes people afraid. People are not willing to court death. They don't want to go without. They're not willing to go without all these fantastic modern conveniences. And I understand. I absolutely understand that. I've been in that position a number of times, and I'm going to probably be in that position again. I give away most of my work for free and don't get a whole lot in return. So I understand. I think we all do understand that. We just don't want to face it. So people get into this groove about everything being a right also. That's something else that really irritates me about that. And if you have read Morality Defined, recall that I discussed how we only have one right. And that right is the right to life. Okay, so in Morality Defined, I explain that you only have one right, and this right stems from as follows. You have placed value on your life. It doesn't matter how much value you have placed on your life. It's just enough to know that you have placed value on your life. Now, you want that respected. Again, it does not matter how much you want that respected. What matters is that it is respected, and you find a way to relay that to others who also have a similar concept, if not the same idea, where they have placed value on their life and they want that respected, so you each respect that. Well, so long as you don't do anything to violate the other individual's consent, giving them justification to consider your life, giving them the okay to extinguish your life, that is basically your right to life. You were saying, hey, I'm respecting your life, that's your right to life. I won't take it or do anything or interfere with it whatsoever unless you give me permission or reason to, and I will do the same for you. That's your only right, the right to life, and it is recognized by individuals who have decided that they have placed value on their life and they want that respected. That is the core foundation of all morality, everything that's out there. And it only gives you one right. That right to life, and what that right to life includes is property and a number of other things, like your time, intellect, and labor, etc., etc. If you want to know more, you'll have to read Morality Defined. But that is your only right. Now, because we only have one right, we can never have a right to anything else. To be able to have a right to anything else essentially is to say that we have a right to somebody else's refinement of their time, intellect, and labor without their consent. It's essentially a violation of their consent to being interacted with when we say, hey, we have a right to health care, we have a right to unemployment, we have a right to this and to this and to this and that and the other. No, the failure to recognize this is the reason why people feel justified in accepting their Social Security and their disability and their pensions from government. Not receiving it or being told they don't get it because it's founded on theft just makes them feel as if their life was a waste. But it doesn't have to be that way. They don't have to feel terrible about it. It's not that terrible. I mean, it's there are solutions and there are ways around this. There are a lot of ways around this. Private charities can provide some, if not all, of the compensation necessary to make up these for these programs, or if taxation were to simply vanish overnight. Now, keep in mind, some people will still suffer, some people will still be hurt, and some people will not survive this. However, the cycle will be broken. More people will be able to create wealth, unregulated, okay? Now, what does this mean? Remember, wealth is not just money. So I'm not talking about counterfeiting. Now, in Liberty Defined, if you recall, I explained how wealth is divided into two separate categories. You have real wealth and artificial wealth. Real wealth is any good, service, or idea that directly satisfies one or more of the four basics of life. The four basics of life are sustenance, shelter, security, and happiness. Anything that can satisfy one or more of those is real wealth. Now, artificial wealth is anything that isn't useful in directly satisfying one or more of the four basics of life, but is almost almost exactly perfectly fit for exchange of that which is real wealth, that which can sustain and or improve the quality of your life. Now, something interesting to think about, all real wealth has the potential to be money, but not all artificial wealth can be money. Okay? You have like gold, okay? Gold, for the longest time, a hard currency, useful for money, but it was also real wealth in the terms that it had aesthetic value. Okay, silver, the same thing. It had more than just aesthetic value and was good to trade. People, in addition to making jewelry out of it, would use it to put a silver coin in their milk to keep their milk from spoiling when they would journey across whatever, take their milk to market. Okay, and there was a lots of things. It had a lot of properties like that. Okay, so now keep in mind that people currently receiving government benefits will be able to find easier paths to earning real wealth and artificial wealth in order to maintain their lives. Okay, there will be a lot easier ways of doing this. If taxation disappears, that means regulation enforcers will essentially disappear. Maybe not overnight for them, but shortly thereafter, and they'll have to find other means to sustain themselves. So there won't be people pushing for the regulations. People won't be pushing for permits and permission slips and et cetera, et cetera. So that's something to consider. No regulations means people can open up a new store, sell whatever they want, and generally interact with others without fear of some law enforcement officer coming up and saying, close this lemonade stand. Like, really? You got nothing better to do than that? So, no, we're not going to have an issue with that. Now, that's for the people who are still feeling as if they are capable of doing something for themselves. That's for the people who go out there and they're like, you know what? I'm not gonna get paid this Social Security anymore. I might as well do something with my life. Now I'm free of all this tyranny and regulations. I can go out there and make something else for myself. Well, in addition to going out there and doing something for themselves, they, as well as others who may not be able to or aren't as adept at doing something like that, they might be able to do something else to offset their no longer eligible government programs, like crowdfunding themselves. Now, a few years ago, if you recall in the news, there was this lady in New England. She, late 2000, late 2000s, early late 2000s, I think, somewhere around 2008, 2011, somewhere around that time frame, where this lady, she, for whatever reason, she had lost her job. She was a school bus driver, some sort of a county or a school employee for a long time, and she had lost her job for whatever reason, and that included her pension. It was a couple $100,000, I think, something along those lines. Well, anyway, within a few weeks, people had crowdfunded her. Okay, almost $600,000, I think, was the total. Either way, she got a lot out of that, and really, the people just came out to help her. I mean, if that can be done for her, why couldn't it be done for others? There's so many things that can be done out there. Now in these crowdfunding things, if you want to do it for yourself, I mean, it would be easy to. You could go out there, you put out there what you show the world, what you did for a living. You ask for your donations, you provide updates as to what they're going to be used for. I mean, you show everything about you, make it as transparent as you possibly can, and people may donate. If you got 100,000 people to donate $1, that's $100,000 right there that you could transform, if you're frugal, into a lot of stuff. I mean, I can go to the grocery store right now and I can take $50 and buy myself groceries for 2 weeks. And people are like, that's impossible. How do you do that? Coupons and name brand or a non or store brand products. I shop all sorts of deals and bargains that they have there. The day old stuff that they have to sell and get rid of. I mean, that's what I have a freezer for. I mean, all sorts of stuff like that. It is possible to do this. So, I mean, you can be creative when you're doing these crowdfunding things, but don't demand. Don't ever say that you have a right to any of this and that you're mad at the world, because people won't respond well to that. And you have to be willing to accept the fact that not everyone is going to want to help you or be able to help you. You're going to have to understand that if you do something like this crowdfunding and you put yourself out there, you're going to catch flack for a lot of things, because not everybody likes it when people say that, oh, well, I received this because I did this. Especially if you were in the military, not everybody is going to be on the same page with that. If you were in the military and you're expecting to get your full pension back, there's no way that everybody's going to agree with you, because the military was, if you recall, just a few moments ago, who's the more foolish, the fool or the fool who follows it? Okay, who's more morally responsible, the order giver or the order follower? Think about that in terms of military. That's important. The same goes for police. Okay, I mean, you have to think about that when doing these sorts of things. But just there are options out there other than state-funded programs. Tax-funded programs. There's other options. There's better options, voluntary options out there. Now there's private charities and churches. They'll do the same thing. Now be prepared for these, specifically for these, to showcase your work history, your disability information, your paperwork, every record that you possibly have. You have to be 110% transparent about your situation, and be willing to take a hit and accept less than what you were promised for with whatever these government entities were promising you, and be willing to do some sort of community service, okay, for it. It's a lot better of a deal than having to start all over from scratch with nothing, okay? So keep that in mind. But here's the thing again. Start over. Be willing to start over. No one wants to hear that. Life isn't fair. But to proclaim that concept and demand people not privy to the promises made to you to pay for your inability to go after those who are responsible for making you a victim of government theft is dishonest. Just understand, you are going to have to take a hit. Don't pass the buck. Remember, you're going to have to take a hit. Take responsibility for your life without placing it on the shoulders of others. Be willing to take the hit. I know this sounds like a broken record, but that's the problem with the system making the promises it did. The ideas I mentioned here are just a few. No one individual will be able to give you all the ideas possible. You're going to have to take responsibility of your life, take life, grab it by the horns, and do with it as you please, and abide by that moral foundation, the non-aggression principle. Now, that being said, it would be easier to understand how to take care of yourself if you understood how you are being oppressed by the government status quo. That idea that government is a necessary evil. And see, this is why it's so difficult to get people to understand the possibilities of how government impedes our freedom to provide and care for ourselves. I mean, taxation does a major doozy on our abilities to interact freely. It blinds us. It puts blinders on us and makes it so that we can't see the other solutions other than just government solutions, okay? That's the problem. It creates fear, okay, to comply. Remember, taxation, if you don't pay, eventually you could be putting yourself in a position where some law enforcement officer could just suddenly be your executioner, judge and jury too. Because taxation, failure to comply with tax laws, potentially carries a death sentence. Now, taxation also creates dependence on the maintenance of what we use as money, okay? It teaches obedience to a negative authority. If you recall one of my previous episodes on authority, real versus artificial, you should understand that. Now, think of freedom as a wide open field where people can roam around without rules. So you're in this wide open field doing whatever it is that you want, not really particularly hurting anybody, but you can just go wherever you want. You don't have any special rules. You interact with people, you make changes and exchanges, you defend yourself. Sometimes you get involved with groups to defend yourself, sometimes you get involved with groups to trade. But the point is, everything is pretty much voluntary, and the default is the non-aggression principle, and people generally respect one another, partially because of the authority that they've created by being reliable and trusted trading partners, and others because they understand that they're going to be protected by you by doing X, Y, and Z. So, government comes in and introduces this idea of taxation. Well, suddenly we all have to use this field by walking in a specific direction to get where we want to go. The field just kind of became a huge racing track of sorts. But there's no actual real speed limit per se. It's just we just have to walk in one direction now in order to, prevent so that people can see better, to be able to do certain things better now. And that's kind of how it comes out to be. Some of us get into the racing track, the rest of us kind of sit in the stands and don't really go anywhere. Well, we can still go where we want, but we must comply with the directions and the toll booth at one end of the track. Some of us reach that toll booth and go around and around and around and around, but others of us never reach it. Eventually, the government grows and the toll booths and taxes increase. More booths are set up. The track condenses down in size. In addition to more people being added to the track via natural births in the area and voluntarily entering into this track from the outside parts of the field. And but we don't pay attention to those of us born into this track don't know there's a field out there. And that's where pretty much all of us are. The last time that something like this happened was the colonization of the Americas. I mean, people came out here and they were moving west and moving west and moving west, and they were free. They could do pretty much whatever it is that they wanted. They were free. They were unregulated. Yeah, they did some bad things. But look at what the government back east was doing. I mean, fight a war, a rebellion against taxes, and then immediately wage a war against people for not paying taxes. I mean, really? The Whiskey Rebellion, how about that? So, this field, now, as time goes by, the taxes keep getting heavier. I mean, we can't go outside the track. We have to stay inside the track, but as long as we stay inside the track, we can't do what we could otherwise do outside the track. The government piles on additional taxes and toll booths. Now there's regulations. There's various speed limits. There's various permits and taxes and other traffic tickets. I mean, the list of penalties and restrictions just grows and grows and grows and grows and grows. And that's what taxation does. So that's why it's so difficult for people to see the possibilities. They can't see beyond, well, what happens if taxation dies and the government's not going to regulate our money? And then what happens? What do? You create your own money. You create your own money, your own wealth, and you go out there into the world and you barter with people and you find out, you figure it out what people want. Because the reason why we use dollars today is not because we think it's a great idea. We use dollars today because we know that if we don't pay our taxes, the government is going to try to do something to us one at a time. It's that fear of government retaliation against us for non-compliance. That's why we use dollars. And that we have been bred and to believe and indoctrinated to believe that that is the way things are. You capture the youth of the present generation, and they will rebel in favor of whatever you want when they come of age. I mean, that's the way it works. I mean, legal tender laws. I mean, you remove taxation, and what happens? Legal tender laws are gone. Then the monopolized currency is no longer there. So now what do? Guess what? You might go out and be able to trade with gold and silver. Okay? There's a whole lot of things. I know I've said it before where in a book that I read a long time ago, Guns of the South by Harry Turtledove. It's a fantastic alternate history book if you've read it. Fantastic if you like history and you like alternate history and a little bit of science fiction. Ooh, this is the book for you. So in this book, Harry Turtledove basically talks about this time, this group that goes back in time and gives AK-47s to the Confederacy in order to help them win the war. I'm not going to spoil it for you. You can judge if you're going to like that or not and read it as you want. But there's a particular scene in there where one of the main characters, Nate Caudell, he goes into a general store, and the general or the grocer there doesn't have enough change for this solid gold piece that Nate pays with. So what does the grocer do? The grocer gives him back smaller denominations of precious metal currencies, store credit, as well as Confederate paper money. Okay, so why would that not actually work in real life? It doesn't. You can say as much as you want, but I can tell you right now, I would be willing to accept that, a store credit plus that plus paper money plus that. I mean, I would be willing. I would absolutely be willing to accept that if that's what was available. But we have technology today that changes that. Why wouldn't I be able to accept on my smartphone a transfer of fiat currency plus Bitcoin or Litecoin or any of the other cryptocurrencies out there, in addition to store credits for wherever I'm at, as well as, say, a stock or a supply of gold. Okay? Why wouldn't I be able to do that today? See, that's what I'm talking about, where people just don't understand the possibilities that are available. But this taxation here, there's so much that it does. It hinders so much of what we do. I mean, not only would we now be able to work and earn 100% of our paychecks, we would still be able to have roads privately maintained. We would be able to open up so many things. I know previously I talked about how in another in an article I wrote, or another episode, I talked about how I travel about 20 something miles one way to my job site. Well, if the roads were suddenly gone, or if the taxes were suddenly gone, the regulations would be gone right after that. And if the regulations were gone right after that, that would mean that where I live in Indiana, in relation to Kentucky where I work, I could cross the Ohio via ferry. Somebody inevitably will come up and they will start up a ferry again in the little town that I live in and go straight across. Okay, people would be able to do that, and that would save so much money, even if all the roads were tolled all the way. What's to say that that ferry there wouldn't also be able to help reduce the cost of those tolls? So if maybe one day I didn't feel like taking the ferry, I could just drive. I mean, there's a whole lot of things that are possible out there. I mean, we can create so much, and it's this is the problem with getting people to understand that there are plenty of choices out there, okay, to replace Social Security and Medicare and government-funded welfare and all of the people who are on government pensions. There's so much out there. It's just limited by your imagination, and so. But I guess it's difficult to see that if you don't understand the effects of taxation. So what happens? What truly does happen when taxation is removed? I'll have to leave that for another episode. So anyway, that will conclude this episode of Liberty and Morality Defined. If you've enjoyed this episode, I would certainly appreciate it if you would visit my website, jimlimberdavis.com, and consider donating. I would love to do this full-time and go out there and make other appearances. So share it with your friends and family. Use it as teaching educational materials by all means. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section below if you're listening to this on YouTube, or hit me up on Facebook at facebook.com/libertydefined, or on Twitter at Jim Limber Davis, and let me know if you would like to hear me speak on something else, a different topic, a more specific topic, or something a little different than what I normally do. But until the next time, thank you very much.